Hello world of YouTube and welcome to the listening log update for June of 2022. I've got 9 albums to talk about this month. I mostly spent this month catching up on some backlog stuff, but I did still check out a couple of new releases that dropped. Some genuinely great stuff too. So let's go ahead and get started on it. This Smile record, or Light for Attracting Attention, was actually a record I was going to talk about at the end of last month, but decided to sit with it a little bit more. One of the things that I always do whenever I sit down and listen to a Radiohead tangential project is really see how far off they branch from their roots as a band, because the guys in Radiohead have kind of been chugging along in their own machine for a long time now. So it's not shocking that potential sonic ideas sound a bit similar to the foundation that they sprouted from. You know, whether it's any sort of tangential band that Tom York is pulling together, or any of his solo work. That Ed O'Brien record from a couple of years ago that I talked about also had moments where it was definitely doing its own thing, but you could tell it was affiliated with Radiohead. And this Smile project is certainly not immune to that feeling as well. Even on the opener, the same sort of creeping synth tones, you definitely get feelings of like Kid A adjacent, or even in Rainbow's adjacent sounds. Some of the loop-centric stuff on tracks like Pandavision and Thin Thing, which do definitely feel like they're tapping into their own thing. Once the groove settles in, I feel like I'm sort of in a realm of King of Limbs, which isn't a bad thing. I think that this record builds upon those obvious Radiohead inspirations from the guys into their own character pretty satisfyingly. I enjoy the leaner, I don't say ragers, but more intense cuts like You Will Never Work in Television Again and We Don't Know What Tomorrow Brings. I like the use of synthetics on We Don't Know What Tomorrow Brings. I think that the buzz on that track in particular adds a good edge to that track. I love how they also juxtapose all of that with tracks like Open the Floodgates and The Closer skirting on the surface. I think that they are some good airy moments for the soundscape to really feel full and grand. You know, the synthetic embellishments on Open the Floodgates add this wholly different texture that I like seeing Johnny and Tom really experiment with. And that's probably the best compliment I can give this record, is that for as much as I like what Tom and Johnny have done on their own and in their own experimental ventures, I like that this sort of sees them incorporating their own idiosyncrasies with something a little bit different, you know, because this could easily have fallen to the wayside, and Tom Skinner's contributions could have easily felt underutilized, because not only are Johnny and Tom on this, but Nigel Godrich produced this, which also helps the album feeling a bit Radiohead adjacent, because a lot of the production styles he's done with those two definitely crop up on here. The drum production in general feels like what Nigel was doing during the King of Limbs era, but that's not to say that it's bad, because it does sound nice. And I think Tom is a really good drummer. I think he knows how to fit in the pocket really, really well. I think the drums on a hair dryer in particular are as a stand-up performance. To me personally, I think that the pocket he's riding on that song is fantastic. Same on the track Speech Bubbles. Once the groove finally settles in on that track, I feel like he finds the pocket and rides it incredibly well. I don't know, this project was really good. I feel like as a fan of Radiohead, it scratched an itch in a way that I was really enjoying. You know, I don't think it's something that I'll revisit as much as, say, a Radiohead record, but I feel like I'll revisit this more than, say, a Muck or some of Tom's weaker solo outings or Ed O'Brien's last record. I enjoyed this a lot. I think it's really, really good. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. It's going to be on the low end of my of the year list, but this was really fun. I like the grooves. I like the wonky nature of it all. I like the airiness. I like the looseness. I like the pacing of the record as well. While the 2010s weren't quite the renaissance I think most fans of Arcade Fire were hoping they would be in post The Suburbs, I can at least respect sticking to their convictions of the hard pivot that was Reflector, while it has made their discography much spottier, because its follow-up, Everything Now, is easily their worst record. I'm still gonna see what they got going on, and on We, I feel like they create a moderate step up above Everything Now, even if it lends to some more of their weakest moments as a band as a result. You know, I like the idea of the opener, Age of Anxiety, this whole idea of a dance song written
in the perspective of now, really analyzing the world as it is now, or the feelings of living in the world of now, where it's lots of insanely intense news going off a lot of the time, honestly creates a really good juxtaposition. I feel like the breathing in the first half is a bit much, and the second half rabbit hole goes on for a bit too long, but it has moments where it hits a pocket, it hits a stride, and I'm really enjoying the experience. I even like End of the Empire 1 through 3. I think that that's actually a pretty solid tune. I hate its final part, though part 4 is on par with some of their worst material yet. Every single time the word unsubscribe came up throughout the song, I laughed a little heavier. It was just a funny-ass song that felt like it was taking itself way too seriously with songwriting that just wasn't it, Chief. However, I feel like it does lead into the best stretch of the album. I like the Lightning 1 and 2. I think that it's the best use of the build-up crescendo into a pocket. I feel like the production choice they did with this record lends itself the strongest on that song. The acoustic stuff, melding with the electronics, works beautifully. And honestly, I think the next read of Unconditional 1 and 2 isn't that bad either. I think the inclusion of Peter Gabriel in the second half is a decent touch. Do I think the self-titled closer is a bit boring and a bit of a non-song? Yeah, but I like the pocket that comes before it a decent amount. Enough to set this album a little bit above everything now. But if it wasn't there, this would easily be their worst album to date. I'm giving this a 6 out of 10. It's not awful, but it's certainly not great either.
Couldn't fall asleep all night. I try with all.
I don't normally revisit reviews when I'm doing a listening log for an artist. I'll usually just kind of respin the project as a whole. But I was curious as to how I really thought about Hollywood's Bleeding at the time, because it's a record that I wouldn't say I revisit all that often, but I feel like I admire the highlights more now than I did at the time. And it's funny, at the end of that review I talked about being torn with Post and his sort of conflict of album composition, you know, not only doing stuff like including soundtrack cuts, which I think is a cardinal sin in album composition, but I also think that his experiments clashed with his pop appeal stuff in a handful of instances. And it's funny, on his newest album, 12 Carat Toothache, I feel like we're in the same circle once again. However, it's even worse now than it was on his last couple of records. It's weird. I feel like Post is definitely going through something. You can tell that on a handful of the cuts on here. You know, whether it's the crooner, ballad-ass scope and a reputation, which I don't think is a great way to start off a record like this. A record that has so many pop appeal tracks, opening it with the honest messaging creates this weird harbinger of things to come.
It was honestly giving MGK on his latest energy, and you guys know how I feel about that album.
And I feel like tracks like that, and Euthanasia, and Lemon Tree don't pair well with tracks like Cooped Up, Wrapped Around Your Finger, and I Like You.
I will say, the honesty that's portrayed on those more somber, grand, ballad moments still feel honest. You know, a track like Lemon Tree, where his performance definitely feels strained, you can feel his pain in a way that I respect, at least. I think that he is putting something out there that feels intrinsically himself. Something that I did appreciate in his last album as well. I actually think that the twangier acoustic stuff kind of fits in a way that I would love to see him explore more outside of the dissection of the pop scope, you know what I mean?
You know, for as honest as Love-Hate Letter to Alcohol feels, it's kind of weird knowing that Post is one of the salesmen or poster children for Jägermeister right now, and it feels weird going from that track into a collaboration with Kid Laroi, a collaboration that I don't think works all that well at all, because listening to these two together is like drinking a Coke and then drinking an off-brand Coke in the same sitting. They just don't pair well together. It tastes funky when put in your mouth at the same time. And to jump off of that into collaborations that I don't think work, I don't really like Gunna, so him on a track I already don't really care about, but Roddy Ricch, an artist that I actually don't hate, I think kind of coasted through his feature on Cooped Up in a way that I was hoping wasn't going to be the case. You know, it's not to say all the collaborations are bad. I do like Doja. I think Fleet Foxes was a great pull for the song, for that song in particular, and I like that Weekend cut. I thought it was alright when it came out. I still think it's alright now. After this album was announced, I figured that it was going to be on the album, and I think that it's in a good place. I think it's a good closer to the record, because there is an actual closer, the sort of generic titled new recording track. Even those two songs together, paired next to each other, further enhance that sort of stark juxtaposition I was talking about. Because it's clear Post is still wanting to do other stuff, but he's also doing this pop stuff because it's what makes money. And I feel like it creates this album experience that just isn't fun to respin personally. You know, for all the highs or all the things that I really like about it, it sets itself back further every single time I throw this on. I wish Post the best. I hope he's doing okay. I hope he's taking care of his problems in a healthy manner. But I also hope that he commits to his experimentations and either drops like a pocket project or a secret release or a surprise album like Drake and then drops a pop album, or switches it up, because this juxtaposition thing just isn't working, man. And in fact, this is probably his weakest album I've talked about on the channel so far. I'm giving it a 4. I really didn't like it. You know, I like some of the parts, but I didn't like all of it together personally. Lopes, composer of the Some Call Me Johnny theme, and more famously, Sonic Mania, did the soundtrack for the new Turtles game, a game that I can't seem to shut the hell up about already. And one of the things that immediately struck me when playing the game was how dope the soundtrack was. And I wasn't going to count T. Lopes out. I figured it was going to be great. I really like T. Lopes' compositional style. I think that he's got this good finger on the pulse of what makes like early 90s style stuff pop. You know, he knows how to throw in some New Jack Swing influence every once in a while. He throws some turntablism in there. And on this project, he also gets to collaborate with a handful of artists to do vocal tracks, so it feels like he's sort of making bigger, longer songs for the sake of adding artists onto them in a good way. You know, I think that it also lends to some of these level songs sounding a bit more long and have a little more going on in them in ways that I think is actually really nice to hear. You know, I like the sleek guitar on Big Apple 3 p.m. I think that the turntablisms on Rumble in the Zoo is fantastic. Same with Roof Running Reptiles and Rush Hour Power. Rush Hour Power, I think, is the menu music, and I love the menu music in this game. The map screen, easily my favorite song on the soundtrack. I think that it's just a nice little groove to set yourself in and just kind of chill with, you know? I also enjoy the collaborations by and large on here. I think that Johnny Atma sounds really good on Panic in the Sky. I said that it kind of sounded like Dexter Holland in the verses, and it still kind of does, but once that chorus hits and you get a little more power in there, I think it just sounds fucking great. I think Anton Corazza sounds great on Mutants Over Broadway. I love Mike Patton's contributions on this version of the Turtles theme. I think this version of the Turtles theme is fan-fucking-tastic. And obviously, you already know I love the Raekwon Ghostface cut, and I love when it comes into the game. I love that it's actually in the game. It's a good collaboration, along with the Mega Ran collaboration on its Pizza Party. I thought that was also a nice surprise to see, because I didn't know he was on the soundtrack. And I think that he pops off on that track as well in a good way. I like the soundtrack. I think it's really, really good. It matches the quality that the game in question has. I'm giving it an 8. I love this thing a lot. I think that it's a really good soundtrack. I think that some of the songs, obviously, not everyone is a smash, but I think that the quality amidst the quantity is a pretty good ratio on this album. I like it a lot. I think it's really good stuff.
Zeit, bitte bleib stehen.
Honestly, following their 2019 Untitled record, I didn't think Rammstein were going to make more music. I just didn't get that feeling from that record. And yet, here they are with Zeit, and I'm into it, honestly. They've done this whole adorning of a new production style from that record, and it's helped them branch out into other ideas that feel tangential to where they've been writing in throughout their whole career, especially throughout their 2000s work. I think a lot of the synth choices on here have this icy twinge to it that feels very tangential to where a lot of their sonic backdrop has, again, kind of danced in on records like Rosenrot and Ryza Ryza. Tracks like the Omener Army, Der Tristan, and Giftig are great showcases of that. I also love how they focus a lot more on piano balladry. They have this airy soundscape that they're kind of dancing in, and I like that they use that to create some really soft moments or some good build-ups to some excellent crescendos. And I think it's smart for them to stack two of them next to each other in the form of the title track Zeit and Schwartz. I think Zeit builds itself up to a classic Rammstein apex, but I think that the path that it takes you to get there feels really nice on this album. The same can be said with the string plucking that happens on Lügen. I think that that's another really good showcase of the soft airiness that coats this record as a whole. But they're also just penning some great aggressive-leaning throttling cuts as well, like Zigzag and OK.
And what would a Rammstein record be without some overly sexual song, Dick Titten, a song about a guy that just wants a wife with huge boobs? From the band that wrote Pussy, what more can you expect?
Angst has this scale to it with the choir that helps enhance the scale tenfold as well. This record in general feels like it's definitely building upon some of what happened on that Untitled record, but in a much more gratifying manner. You know, for as much as I like that Untitled project, I don't really spin it as much as I thought I would. This, however, is a record that I do feel like once the winter months start to roll in and things start to get colder and colder, I'll find myself throwing this into my rotation full stop. This is getting an 8 from me. I really enjoyed this thing, and I wasn't expecting to walk away from this project loving it this much, but I am really pleasantly surprised with it.
If I come around you, can I be myself? Wind up in a mirror.
With thinking of how full of life the house and dance genre as a whole should have, even while having these grand expressions of love or loss throughout these hypnotic grooves, you would think Drake might have been able to pull this off on Honestly Nevermind. To some degree. He's tried dance-flavored music, like on Views and on More Life, but on Honestly Nevermind, this surprise album that he decided to drop, instead we get another Drake-length album without enough to fill in all that time with anything all that interesting. I like house music. I like dance music. I like the repetitive nature that genre kind of warrants. However, I don't think Drake utilizes some of what he's given here all that gratifyingly. And honestly, I think Drake might be the worst component of this record on top of some of the more underwhelming instrumentals that coat this record that's like 5 tracks too fucking long. And it's not even like I can compliment any grand pockets of this record, because for as much of a great foot as I feel like this record does start off on, I don't hate Falling Back and Texts Go Green. I'm into the vibe. By that point, I feel like the instrumentals are really carrying me through it. Even if Drake isn't necessarily doing anything super great on it, he's at least striking notes that feel Drake adjacent, especially on Texts Go Green. But then Currents comes in, and it creates this just completely disengaging experience because its use of the cyclical nature that the genre that it's inspired by breeds is made all the more obnoxious with one of the worst sample choices you could have chose for a song of this nature. I don't want to hear a song that sounds like it's being soundtracked by my neighbors having sex upstairs. And then it doesn't help that that's followed by some of the most dull stretches that this record has going on, with tracks like Keeper and Calling My Name going in one ear and out the other. Like, yeah, I'm glad when Massive finally comes into the fray because it's another decently put together soundscape, and I love the pianos on that track. Moments like it and Overdrive are few and far between on this record that even by the last couple of tracks loses focus on what the album is supposed to be. It devolves back into the regular trap stylings and you know, normal vibe that Drake typically sets himself in. I would have even loved to have seen 21 Savage, who is on the closer of this record, hop on a house-inspired beat. But that's not the case, and it's a damn shame. This record blue balls you, and it sucks. And when it's not blue balling you, it's leaving you in this ambiguous gray that isn't fun to listen to.
It's strange. When listening to this album, one album that kept cropping up into my mind was Kanye's Yeezus, which is another project that I feel like failed in ways that it shouldn't have, given the artist in question, but does so splendorously.
I'm giving it a 3. For all of its heights, it's got some really dull lows that just really bog down the experience for me personally.
Gatsing up the sleeves. They got the traps and apparatus for your grief.
You know, when I first heard Lupe's sister Aisha Jaco on the opener to Drill Music in Zion, I knew I was in for something special. I've got a soft spot for Lupe Fiasco. He's got some real classics in my eyes. I love his first 2 records, Food and Liquor and The Cool. I listened to them growing up. I also think he's had some great crop-ups over the 2010s in Tetsuo and Youth. And I was very excited for Drill Music in Zion as well, just because he has been on a pretty good creative pocket. And to find out that him and Soundtrack pulled this album together in 72 hours is fucking sane to me. This is a record that definitely sits in the pocket of where a decent amount of the big hitters in the hip-hop zeitgeist have been throttling in this year. A lot of introspection, a lot of smoothness in the production, and a tightness that is insanely well put together. I think that this record is, bar none, one of Lupe's best. I think that it has some insanely good writing on here. Not just the opener, Lions Dean has some really good weaving around in its lyrics, but I think that the hand analogies and discussion of hands on Precious Things sticks the landing full stop. I think the song Kiosk following that, written from the perspective of a jewelry shop kiosk runner in the mall, is so well penned. I think that Miss Mural is a great deconstruction and reflection on Lupe's place in the industry and his sort of perspective as an artist. I also love his sort of reflections and discussions of betrayal or the hopes of life being different on Phonem are well pulled together. I even think that his tangential offshoots, but don't always stick the landing, on Autobotto and Goaty are pretty amicable cuts. Are they the strongest cuts in the album? No, but I think that they are still really well put together. In any other record, they would still be highlights, but on a record like this, they are easily the weakest points. I think that this album is fantastic. I think not only Lupe and Soundtrack, but a lot of the collaborators on here are really good. You know, Naira comes up a couple of times on Seattle and Precious Things, and I think her contributions are great as well. The overall sonic palette of this album is smooth and bleeds really well together, and I think that even amidst its own sonic divergence in production style, Lupe still sits at the top of it fantastically. He adapts to the sonic shifts that the album takes, and really pens, again, some of his strongest stuff yet. I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. It's incredible. Strong album of the year contender for sure.
Roll up in a Beamer, Bentley, Lexus. Logic, stay connected on the block, bitch, I'm Tetris. Snatch a necklace, deal it.
For the first time in a long time, I was actually really excited for a new Logic record. I was stoked for Vinyl Days, not just because I like No Pressure and I thought that it was Logic really pulling his shit together and dropping a really solid outing. Even if I didn't like Bobby Tarantino 3, No Pressure showed that when putting his mind to it, he can drop a really solid record. And he seemed to come into Vinyl Days with a mission statement. Not only was it his last album on Def Jam, but it's an album that is supposed to be a love letter to sample-based hip-hop and that whole subculture within hip-hop that I am a big fan of. You guys know I love sampling in hip-hop, and I think that as far as beat selection goes, this is some of the best I've heard Logic hop on in a long fucking time. And it's partially due to some of that sample work. You know, obviously there's bangers like on Tetris or on Nardwuar. I love the fact that he has Nardwuar on this song, but samples him so liberally. I love the strings on Breath Control. I think the production on Clouds is fantastic. I love Quasi's beat. And I love that he's working with producers to help that sound even better, like Madlib or DJ Premier on Vinyl Days. You know, I feel like by and large, beat choice, Ace's stuff. I feel like messaging-wise, this album gets a little swept up in itself and kind of starts to feel like your own sort of normal Logic project in some pockets, but I even like how in some of those pockets, he tries to call attention to that, or he tries to be a little more self-aware about it. You know, he's taking a page out of what a lot of hip-hop is doing right now and reflecting in ways that I feel like they're trying to aim for growth. You know, tracks like Tetris and Nardwuar see him getting into his braggadocious side, but I like that tracks like Black White Boy or even La Donda do a good job at talking about his place as an artist in the industry or his bouts he's had with heavy criticism to his music. You know, he talks about his relationship with Anthony Fantano on La Donda, and Anthony crops up in one of the multitude of skits on this record, which, I mean,
I think it's a cool idea. Do I think it's a little much? Yeah. Getting J.J. Abrams on your rap record is cool, I guess. But it's just kind of, the stuff like that, it feels like it's a bit much. Do I still like this record when it's very focused, though? Absolutely. Aside from those tracks, I also really like a lot of the contributions on here by and large, and I think that some of the artists drop some genuine bars. Like, I think Currency's honestly pretty solid on Clouds, and I think that he's a good way to close out the track. I'm not a big Action Bronson fan, but he sounded great on End My Lifetime. Obviously, I think Royce is pretty choice on 10 Years. And AZ matches Logic's energy and heat on Carnival, which is another standout beat on the project by and large. Is everything perfect? No. Do I feel like it gets, again, a little wrapped up in itself at pockets? Yeah, while I like the story of Logic beating Jizza in a chess match, I don't think the RZA's contributions on that song really add a whole lot. I've never been the biggest Game fan, and he's fine on the track that he's on, but if he wasn't there, I wouldn't have cared either way. And as much as I like Rogue One for sounding like 1990 hip-hop to its fullest, I wanted just a bit more. There's pockets where this album just gives you small little snippets that leave you craving so much more. But by and large, this project is very, very solid. I think from a production standpoint, easily one of Logic's best. I think even from a bar perspective, he's dropping some really good stuff. I get sick of the chopper flow stuff when it crops up. I feel like Logic's better when he's just riding in a pocket in an earnest manner.
Like, I think he gets real as fuck on Decades and on Therapy Music, which he honestly did something I didn't really think about. He talked a lot about mental health on the Suicide song, but people just kind of dunked on him for how he messaged it. And he kind of went silent on it, and it's a pretty important topic. And kudos to him for really calling people out for that shit.
But I feel like by and large, good stuff, man. Really good stuff. I think this is very solid. And I honestly, when the closer Sayonara came in and I looked at the runtime, I was actually kind of excited to see what he was going to pull together. And I feel like he closes this album on as good of a start as he opens it. I'm giving this a 7. It's another 7. It would have been better if it had less going on. But really, really good stuff, Logic. I enjoyed this a lot.
Can't deny or hide all my lies. That's why we get high.
Now, did I check out the Zeit project because of the Denzel Curry feature? Yeah, I'm honestly not all that familiar with IDK's music, but walking away from Simple, I am very much interested in checking out this guy's catalog. I think that this Pocket project that dropped back in May is fantastic. I think him and K Tronada pulled together some really good stuff together. I think K Tronada's production on here is aces. You know, I love the almost throwback sound seen on tracks like Dog Food and Taco. The piano loop on Taco is fantastic. I love the jerky groove on Zaza Tree that bleeds really well into Breathe. I think that The Code is a well-produced track as well. The piano loop on that song, fantastic. And this record's trying to aim for a sort of playback on itself nature that records like, you know, King Gizzard's Nonagon Infinity do, or Meshuggah's Eye, or honestly, I feel like Drake's Honestly Nevermind was also trying to go for that vibe. It just did not stick the landing nearly as well as IDK did on Simple. I think that it is a well-penned project as well. You know, a lot of the record sees IDK talking about his life or his come-up, the stresses that he goes through. Tracks like Drugstore and Dog Food talk about drugs and excess or selling and life on the streets. You know, tracks like Zaza Tree talk about his stresses and how he smokes to kind of cope with it. Taco also sees him talking about confrontations that he's had or beef that he has to squash. I think that it's honestly, again, showcasing a different tangent to his personality. I think it sticks the landing very well. Obviously, I talked about Denzel's collaboration on Dog Food on the Denzel features, but I feel like Mike Dimes on The Code is also a really good collaboration that comes together fantastically. I like this record a lot. My biggest complaint with it is I honestly want more. You know, similarly to another Pocket project that I talked about this year, Earl Sweatshirt Sick, I think that this is just a good creative unit here. Not just the artist and producer, but the features on deck. Almost to a more intense degree, I wish there was more here than what's presented. And I almost feel like the length almost kneecaps it ever so slightly. I think that these two could have pulled together a couple more tunes to thrive in this pocket. You know, not only are the beats choice and the lyrics well penned, the hook work on here is also infectious as fuck. That loop of the block is hot on Dog Food is sick. I love the hook Breathe. I think that a lot of what this record has going on is just a good energy. And I want so much more. I'm giving it a 7. I really, really like this thing, but man, have I not walked away from a project wanting more than with this project.
And that's going to be my month. What did you think about it? Have you heard any of these records? Do you like them? Let me know your thoughts on these albums in the comments down below. If there's an album you'd like for me to check out and talk about in this segment, let me know that as well in the comments down below. If you did like this video, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more of my music, gaming, and general nerdery content, be sure to subscribe. Special thanks to my patrons. If you want to join the ranks to get early access to content, exclusive content, or to help drive the community with polls, it's linked in the description. I've talked about it a lot, but it's Patron Appreciation Month right now, so a lot of the content that's going on is going to be stuff curated by my patrons, and I've got a couple of polls going up this month for future stuff as well. But other than that, thank you again so very much for watching. I've been Viral Rack. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.